All right, so yesterday we looked at how to read a scatter plot, interpreting a scatter plot. Today we're going to talk about making a scatter plot. First thing you need to do is determine the intervals for the x and y axes. You will often be given just plain graph paper, and you will have to decide on how to number the axes. So for example, down here we have high temperature, and it's anywhere from 77 down to 51. And cups of cocoa sold is from 6 all the way down to 31. Now, you might find that you have enough space on your graph paper to count by ones. You might have to count by twos, count by fives, depending on the data. Use a break if necessary to skip up to the section of numbers you're working with. So high temperature is 77 to 51. I don't need any of the numbers from 0 to 51. I might assign a break that skips from 0 straight to 50. But on this end, my low number is actually a 4, and then 5, 6, 6, 7. There's no reason to put a break for cups of cocoa sold because the numbers are so close to 0 anyway. Plot the data points. Remember, in an ordered pair, the x value comes first. So our x value is also known as our control. And the y value is known as the dependent. So for this example, we're saying that the high temperature, we think, has some control over the number of cups of cocoa being sold. So we're going to put high temperature as the thing that we're like, okay, the temperature today is 77. What happened for number of cups of cocoa sold? If the data appears to flow in a straight line, you would draw a line of best fit. It should go through the middle of the data and flow with the data. And fitted lines can be used to make predictions. So we're going to talk about those for our high temperature and cups of cocoa sold graph. So in order to create that scatter plot, I am going to first look at the x and y axis that we talked about. And so on the x-axis, I had to put a break. I skipped straight to 50. So the first number labeled is 50, and then I went 51, 52, 53, 54, 55. I only labeled 55, but you can see I'm counting by ones. 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, all the way up to 75, 76, 77. So all of the values can fit on here by counting by ones. Next, on the y-axis, which is the dependent, I did cups of hot cocoa. Notice I don't have a break there, and I had enough space to count by ones. I started here at 0 and was able to fit all the way up to the highest number, which was 31. And I have a title, relationship between high temps and cocoa sales. My y-axis, high temp, and I have a unit, degrees Fahrenheit, and my y-axis, cups of hot cocoa. Cups is the units. So over here, my x-axis, and up here, my y-axis. Then I plotted all of my points, all of my coordinates. So the first one that was on there was 77 and 6. So I went over to 77 degrees. I went up to 6 and put a dot. So that dot represents on a 77-degree day, 6 cups of hot cocoa were sold. So each one of these points represents a day in my table. It says, look at the plots you've pointed on your scatter plot. Do the points appear to follow along a straight line? And we would say, yes, they are very tightly grouped. They would be a strong correlation. Notice my line is already there. What I did was I took my ruler and I lined it up so that I was splitting the dots in half. I wanted about half the dots above my ruler and about half my dots below the ruler. And I wanted them to be scattered. So I wanted there to be ones above and below all the way along the line on both sides. So I have drawn a line that follows my data. Notice it doesn't have to go through the origin. And not only is it a strong correlation, it is also a negative correlation because as the temperature increases, the hot cocoa sales are decreasing. So as it gets hotter temperatures, you can see I'm selling very low numbers of hot cocoa. But back here when it was colder, I was selling very high numbers of cups of hot cocoa. So we would say it is a strong negative correlation. That I would put on the first part of my graph here. So yes, it was in a straight line. We added our fitted line, and we would say it was a strong negative correlation. Suppose one pot makes 10 cups of cocoa. How many pots should the owner make when the high temperature is 50 and 40 degrees? So if I look at this, I'm going to use my fitted line. I'm not going to use individual points on the graph because the fitted line sort of takes an average of all of them. So if I go here to 50 and I go up until I hit my fitted line, it looks right here like 50 degrees needs about 31 cups of cocoa. So 31 cups would take about 3 batches, right? 3 pots of hot cocoa. And if I go over to 60, you can see that at 60 degrees, I'm around 20 cups, which would be about 2 pots of hot cocoa. So the reason I went up here to 60 is because you can see 40 didn't fit in my graph. So I was trying to look for a pattern. So when it went up by 10 degrees, I needed 1 less pot. If I go here to 70 degrees, it looks like I need about maybe 8 cups. And so I would need 1 pot for that. So every 10 degrees looks like it's about 1 pot. So this one looks like about 1 pot. This one looks like about 2 pots. This one's looking like 3 pots. So if I went back to 40 degrees, which would be 10 degrees cooler, I would probably need 4 pots of hot cocoa. So 50 degrees, we said 3 pots. And I'll put the about symbol there. And 40 degrees, about 4 pots. If the temperature rises to 90 degrees, how many cups of cocoa do you predict will be sold? Please justify your answer using the scatter plot you created. So if I look here, when it was 70 degrees, I only needed 1 pot. By the time I get up to 80, I'm already going to be around 0. And 90, I would hypothetically be in the negatives. Since we can't make negative pots of coffee, we would have to say 0 pots because we would need 0 cups. The line would be in the negatives. Using the scatter plot you created, predict how many cups of cocoa will be sold if the temperature drops to freezing or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So we already said every 10 degrees was about 1 pot. So 50 degrees was 3 pots. 40 degrees went to 4 pots. So we would say 30 degrees would go to about 5 pots. And that's really close to 32. So we might say about 5 pots of coffee. 5 pots of hot cocoa. So creating a scatter plot, not too difficult. Once you have your X and your Y axis in place, the rest is just plotting coordinates and trying to make a fitted line so that you can make predictions.